Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude. But you're not here to listen to me talk. You want to hear about these great guests that we bring on and diving into their career journeys. Great people with exciting paths. Our conversations align with the methodology from the Pathfinders book, and we touch on career maps, all 5 dimensions of them: skills, accomplishments, achievements, positions, and some of that fun stuff, and how individuals grew with their support system. We like to call it the Personal Board of Advisors. May hear it referred to as the PBA throughout the show today. This will be posted on LinkedIn. Please make sure that you comment, and we'll also go on to the other podcast platforms. So thank you to our guests who are about to join us shortly. We start off with a couple of favorite quotes. You'll find out who provided the quotes from our special session today. We're going to have 2 guests at one time. First quote: "We power through and power down, but long-term energy requires powering up." One of our guests' friends, Aaron King. Next one: "What's meant for you will sometimes feel scary, risky, and new. Ease and calm don't always mean you're moving in the right direction. The biggest rewards usually come from having the guts and perseverance to create your own path," by Young Pueblo. The last one, getting ready to start things off, talks about leadership. "Being a leader doesn't mean you have followers. It means you go first." Thanks, Chelsea, for those. But we're going to talk about the other guests. Quick review of Sam, who comes with a well-rounded experience in over 16 years in the benefits administration and HR world. He's done compensation, payroll, a bunch of different spaces, and he loves it. Just wait for this energy to come onto the show. Roles span from analyst to relationship management, senior director, climbing the ladder, yep, family man, and he's an ex-laxer. We'll wait to hear more about some of the sports tales. Chelsea, dog lover, mountain bike extraordinaire, big music fan. You'll hear more about that in a second. Also, I guess we have to talk about work things a little bit. Compensation practice leader for Heron Palmer. Both of our guests today from the awesome firm Heron Palmer. She's responsible for partnering with clients on a wide array of compensation projects, including base pay structure design, job architecture development, incentive plan design, comprehensive compensation analytics. So you're kind of like, okay, we're talking about career maps. These are some of the brains behind what those good bones look like whenever we're putting those together at an organization. So I'm always learning from them. Chelsea's a firm believer in pay transparency, and they together did an awesome session at the most recent PHRA conference. Hopefully they talk about the innovation they brought to the pay transparency conversation. Fun fact that Sam was an extra in The Dark Knight Rises, and the 2 of them are big music fans. They may have another career in the music industry. Who knows? Let's hear from them. Enough from me. Welcome to the stage, Chelsea and Sam.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Pete.
Right? Thank you.
Hi, guys. So the way we start this off is to just talk about, what did you want to be whenever you were growing up? The career map has to start somewhere. Change is inevitable. But what was going through your head? Young Chelsea, young Sam.
Young Chelsea thought she was going to be a doctor. I do a lot of Google WebMD searching, I'm one of those, but I think as a child, I have scoliosis. Another fun fact about me, pretty severe. And I think because I spent so much time at doctor's appointments growing up, kind of managing that, it just seemed familiar. And it wasn't until, honestly, after college, after my master's degree, that I changed my mind. So kind of a long way from where I ended up, but it'll be a fun discussion to talk about how I got there.
Okay. Sam, how about you?
Well, fun fact about me, I still like to rap as a hobby. And Pete, you got to witness me break a little freestyle off whenever we did our presentation at the PHR.
Was that a freestyle? That wasn't rehearsed, not planned at all?
Well, it was a written freestyle.
Okay.
I'm not really great coming off the top of that.
What would Marshall Matthews think about Jesus?
But when I was younger, I thought I was going to be a rapper. I mean, I thought I was going to be in music for sure. I was actually in a hip hop group in high school. The guy that was like our producer who made all the beats, still does that today. He still sends me beats. I still like to write little raps on them and have fun with it. But I thought I would be a rapper or an athlete. But towering over you at 5'7", the athlete part kind of fizzled out around college. So I had to find something a little bit more practical. So then I wound up going to business school, and here I am as the senior director of distribution at Herron Palmer.
So talk to us a little bit more, Sam, about where you went to school, what you studied
Sure.
through that, and if there was, one or two classes or things that you picked up on the educational adventure, and then we'll go over and hear a little bit from Chelsea as well.
Yeah. So I went to St. Bonaventure University up in Olean, New York, about an hour away from Buffalo, for those who don't know about it.
Cutco knives.
Olean, that's true. Yeah. Zippo, also a large local business in the area. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, this is a Pittsburgh podcast, right? I live in Pittsburgh. I'm a local. I'm a Yinzer myself. Duquesne and the A10, that's where the Bonnies play. So we're rivals. But so I went to business school there. I actually was super involved with the athletic department and did marketing and promotions as an intern in my undergrad years. And then they actually asked me to come back and run marketing and promotions for the athletic department. So I really thought at that point, Pete, that my career was going to be in sports marketing. But I graduated from college. So I got my MBA and then graduated from grad school in 2009, which for those of you who are old enough to remember, was a terrible time to be in the job market for the first time in your life. But some of the things that I learned, I mean, like, I feel like my finance classes were probably the most educational, not just for my career, but for my life in general. Understanding how to manage money, understanding like the one concept that always sticks out to me is the time value of money. There's a quote that I love to remind my wife about, that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So it's important to save. It's important to think about that, but it's also important to remember that inflation is real, and sometimes your money is worth less in the future. So that's just a little tidbit there for the audience to chew on later.
Well, while we're on the financial advice, there was one thing that my mom shared with me growing up on the farm up in Butler: save and invest wisely. And it was always similar piece. And I guess the other one that I learned along the way is that the most magical thing out there is compound interest. So how can you set it away and forget about it? But we're not here to talk about financial guidance, right? That's not what any of us is here for. And speaking of things that are slightly change of topic, Chelsea, we heard about the stuff that you're doing now. That's what you went to school for, right?
Not even a little bit. So I went to college at Appalachian State University, down in Boone, North Carolina. Many of you pronounce it differently, but that's the right way. Is Appalachian.
How do you spell it? Just set it straight for us.
How do I spell it?
Well, everybody probably spells it the same way, but just make sure we're talking about the same place.
Yeah, so it's in Boone, North Carolina. So that's Western North Carolina. So shout out to Western North Carolina right now, because they are going through it still several weeks in. But yeah, it's a beautiful mountain town in Western North Carolina, and I went there thinking I would again I did exercise science pre-professional, which checked all the boxes for if I wanted to go to med school or PA, PT, you name it. That was my plan. And when I was finishing up with my bachelor's, we had a professor that had transferred down and opened up a research lab. And so I started working in that research lab and eventually kind of stood it up with my mentor. And I ended up sticking around to get my master's in exercise phys and kind of a clinical research concentration. So in some ways, it's kind of funny when you think about the different skills that you learn and how you can apply them in different settings, because that job, while it sounds wildly different, and it was in a lot of ways, it still had a data analytics component. It still had a kind of a leadership or an executive presence component when you think about reporting out on and publishing research, presenting it in a public setting. And it also had a people connection component, which is an important part of what we do, because I was working with human subjects. So I wasn't in the back of the lab with animals or, doing different testing. I was collecting real-time data on human subjects. So I think in a lot of ways it applied, and there's a lot more to the story of how I got to Colorado and into this job. And we can cross that path a little bit later, but
yeah, well, no, let's cross the chasm.
How
did you migrate from Best Coast, East Coast back towards West Coast and stopping in Colorado? Talk to us about the first step after grad school.
Yeah. So to start with, so I'm born and raised in North Carolina. So I had been in North Carolina my entire life to that point. And when I was in grad school, I came to Denver to speak at the ACSM conference. And so I got a glimpse of the Rocky Mountains. And as soon as I finished grad school, I was kind of burnt out on school. I did not want to go to med school anymore, but I wasn't certain about getting my doctorate. And so, younger Chelsea just thought, let's take a year, let's move to Colorado and find a job, any job to pay the bills. And it'll give me a center that puts me closer to places I want to explore as a poor recent grad. And so that's all it was, right? I applied for some jobs in Colorado before moving, but none of them were high level enough to where those companies were going to pay my travel expenses to come out and interview. And so a friend of mine from college and I just ripped the Band-Aid off. We moved out there with a little bit of money in our bank accounts. We signed up for an apartment online without seeing it, which turned out being in a super sketchy neighborhood. And it's all an adventure, right? And I have now been out here for a little bit over 12 years. And to make a long story a little bit shorter, I eventually stumbled into HR because shortly after I moved to Denver, it got wildly expensive. I was working as a fitness manager for a minute because people saw exercise in my degree and they were like, oh, sweet, everybody will be impressed that we've got someone with a master's working at the gym. And I ended up training someone who was part of the HR team that I eventually joined, just trying to try on something new. And I never looked back.
Wow. Okay. Following the American dream, as they say.
Yeah.
Sam, after you finished up with your MBA, did you take that marketing job, or did you take your talents out to LA and meet with Dr. Dre, or how did that go?
Wow. I wish I would have. Sometimes obviously I don't live with regret, Pete, but sometimes
Snoop was just in Pittsburgh. He was at the Steelers game. I don't know. Did he call you up?
Yeah.
No?
I got to try and slip on my card. But yeah, so what happened with me was it was a tough time to find a job in 2009. I moved back to Pittsburgh. I thought I had some pretty good inroads from the relationships and stuff that I had developed at St. Bonaventure, but there just wasn't anything for an entry-level guy during a recession. And there was a company in the proprietary education world, which for those of you at home, if you don't know what that is, that's this is like the University of Phoenix, online degree programs. And those were booming at the time because lots of people were out of work. They were thinking, oh, we got to go back to school, to build my resume up. And, essentially I accepted a job there in a kind of business to consumer sales role, truthfully, because they were plentiful. And I wound up having a lot of success in it. I got promoted quickly into management, eventually got promoted into training and recruiting. So that kind of got me into, that was kind of my first foray into HR. To be completely honest, and I don't want to denigrate any my former employer, but which I'm not even sure if it exists any longer. But I got to the point where ethically I really couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to be in that particular industry or with that particular company, and I just got super lucky. One of the other trainers that I worked with left and went to Willis Towers Watson and brought me along with her. And it was in benefits administration, which, Pete, I did not know even existed as a market at the time. But some of Willis Towers Watson's clients were Coca-Cola and Costco and some of these big name brands. So I thought, okay, this must be a noble business. And I went all in. I invested a lot of my time and energy into becoming the best analyst I could. I got promoted a couple of times, eventually got promoted up into a consulting and business development role, which coincidentally is how I met Heron Palmer. because, core kind of bread and butter part of our business is in sourcing advisory and running RFPs and doing contracting with providers, WTW being a provider in this case. And so I made a ton of connections through there. And then I left WTW for a little while and went to a place or a company that used to be called Basis, now called Bridgeway Benefit Technologies. That was when I was doing my relationship management role, managing relationships with some of their largest TPA customers. And then ultimately, a few years later, this opportunity with Aaron Palmer popped up, and I've been there ever since.
And the rest is history, or a little ditty. So along the way, there's probably a couple of folks that guided you in various capacities, Sam.
Sure.
You talked about somebody from WT that took you over to Willis Towers Watson. Would you say that was one of the individuals on your personal board of advisors? Just, Chelsea mentioned how she met somebody at the gym. Let's talk about some of those guides you had along the way. Talk about, where you might have found them and some of the things you might have asked.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny that I've kind of lost touch with that person who brought me over, quite honestly. But
reminder, action item, Sam, go send some kudos just to thank you. Hey.
Yeah. Wait, let me write that note down. I think what I found, Pete, over the last probably call it 8 years or so of my career is that, and I actually, this is part of what I was doing yesterday and up in the Northeast in Rhode Island in our speaking engagement. I think I underrated the value of relationship management in the early part of my career. I think I used to think of everything as sort of transactional. You go and talk to somebody, you give them their card, you guys do business together, and that's not how things work in the real world, and that's not how things work in business. Relationships take a long time to cultivate, and there are long-term relationships that might not have any kind of impact on the business that you're doing right at the moment, that kind of pop up in other places. And so I think that I'm mad at myself for, waiting until I turned 30 to recognize how important that was. But now that I've got a ton of people in my corner, both at the organization that I work with, or that I work at or work for, along with former colleagues of mine, who I stay in regular touch with, and folks who I've met along the way, who I often will go to for advice. So, do you want me to call these people out by name?
What?
I said, do you want me to call these people out by name?
You can in a moment if you want to, but I want to pull a thread there, peel back the onion, whatever. There's a whole bunch of sayings for it. And then, Chelsea, we're going to hear your thoughts on this too. A recurring theme that we've heard on the show a bunch of times is earlier career professionals don't value relationships or planning ahead as much as we might think. So it's one of those, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. Song reference for both of you. So why do we think that is? We'll go Chelsea first and then back to Sam. Why are younger folks not valuing these relationships and maybe this concept of a PBA earlier on in their careers?
I mean, I was very clearly flying by the seat of my pants to start with, right? And so I was, dealing with. I remember when I told my parents that I was taking this HR assistant job, and I remember my dad being like, "I'm sorry, you went to college for 6 years and you're just throwing it in the trash," basically. And in my mind, I'm like, well, does it really matter? It was kind of at that point where you've got to have a bachelor's in something for an employer to talk to you, which is a whole nother. That could warrant its own podcast discussion in its entirety. But I was just kind of searching for an opportunity. And at the end of the day, I remember interviewing for that job. And ironically, the colleague that interviewed me works at Brown & Brown in Denver now. And I remember his name's Jesse Studeman. And I remember him interviewing me and looking at my, it was a CV. So it wasn't even a resume. It was my CV with all of my, everything that had been published. And I remember him being like, I don't understand. Why do you want this job? And I essentially said, listen, hopefully this shows that I can learn things and that I can commit to something and see it through. And apart from that, I'm just trying to establish a career that's going to be able to, at that point, just to pay enough for me to live here and be able to enjoy all that Colorado had to offer. It's going to pay me enough to buy my ski pass and my mountain bike. And that was, so again, at that, I wasn't planning for long term then, and I didn't know enough about the new field I was getting into. I don't know that that applies to everyone, but for me specifically, that's my answer. I mean, I was not planful. I was very much just seizing the moment, showing up well, trying hard, and hoping it worked out and opened up doors for me.
I think it's one of those kind of feast or famine and the scarcity mindset, right? You're like, hey, I need to pay for food. I need to get out of this shady neighborhood. I need to get my Epic Pass or whichever one you got, and your bicycle as well. And the nice to haves in that situation are some of the other relationships. You probably didn't start networking and going to local SHRM events at day 1, day 2, day 3.
Oh, but I did because that was part of my goals. So Cami Redpath, shout out to her. She was the CHRO that hired me onto this team, and I got my SHRM CP certification, and that's what allowed me to earn my first promotion. So I feel like she's one of my long-term mentors, still very much a personal friend of mine, and a gut check for me when I need somebody's opinions or 2 cents. Like, I trust her to a T, and she helped me start envisioning what a path might look like. And I mean, in HR, you have to network, right? So I feel like that as soon as I took that path, networking became a thing. I was more resistant to it to start with because I was intimidated, and going to these meetings and outings with other HR professionals that are seasoned. And I'm like, I don't really know what HR is still. It was intimidating, but it was something that I took on, and I saw the value in it more and more as time passed.
So we're going to come back to you and ask how to get past that intimidation whenever it comes to networking. So hold that thought, Chelsea. But we still need to hear from Sam around why are earlier career professionals not emphasizing the relationship piece as much. Let's hear you chime in there.
Yeah, well, I think it's 2 things. One, I kind of alluded to in my little soliloquy earlier, which is I think that when you're younger, you think of networking and you think of meeting people as much more transactional, right? Like, there's a purpose for this, and if that purpose isn't met, then the relationship doesn't exist and we move on, right? And that's not really how it works in the real world. The other thing is, I think just when you're younger, there's a lot more, and they're complementary, I suppose. It's a lot more about like instant gratification. You alluded to it a bit yourself, Pete, right? Like, when I was younger, my main motivation was I got to move out of my mom and dad's house. Like, I can't be living with my parents when I'm 23 years old. That doesn't, like, I'm a grown man, damn it. And so, I was thinking about work as a means to income. And, and like I said, I mean, I took a job that ultimately was in an industry that I wasn't really a huge fan of, or with a company that I wasn't a huge fan of. And unfortunately for me, I felt a little stuck. Again, sometimes when I think back, like, I probably could have done a lot better job building relationships the way I do today and figuring out a much better path out rather than getting super duper lucky the way that I did.
It'd be interesting to go out and actually interview some folks, and particularly maybe we'll do this at the next one of the next PHRA events and see some of the younger folks in the room and just ask them why they're there. And if you recall from the conference this year, we had a couple of students that were there. So I wonder if they were getting college credits for it, as one of the pieces, but those different incentives. So that would be an interesting one to see a little bit more. And there's so much opportunity to go beyond that transactional piece. Another one that we hear a lot, guys, is I'm only going to go networking whenever I need a job. Right. So if I'm out networking, it's because people think I need a new job. But that's not the case. There's a bunch of different, outcomes, potential benefits and outcomes from said networking. Chelsea, we're coming back to you to talk a little bit about how we get past, how you maybe tell a self story. Did you do a power pose? It was at Amy Cuddy before you went into the networking room and flew open the doors. Everybody, I'm here. But how'd you get past that intimidation? And then Sam, I'm going to come over and ask the question to you of, what's your approach? Just kind of walk us through a scenario. You're going into, there's 150 people in the room, nobody, right? So think about how you're going to start your networking approach there. But Chelsea, you first.
I mean, I don't know that there's any super insightful, like I didn't turn into a superhero, right? And all of a sudden, it's like you just had to do it. It's, you have a choice. You can stay stagnant. I could stay in that HR assistant position, or I could just take it on and say, this is what I have to do. This is what it's going to take for me to get to the next step. And I don't think that's changed, right? As the leader of the compensation practice now, it's one of the reasons why I shared one of my favorite quotes, right? What's meant for you will sometimes feel scary, risky, and new. It is what it is. Life, even if you don't seek those things out, they will find you. And so you can either rise to the occasion, or you can kind of cower in fear and shy away from it. And so to me, I very much am of the mindset of see anything that scares you or that's challenging as an opportunity. And I have it tattooed on my arm to remind myself of that, because it's really easy to forget it. But I think that's the attitude that you have to have. And so I just, that was an expectation. It was something I needed to do. So I showed up, and that same idea has kind of existed and presented itself at several other huge turning points in my career, and even outside of just my career, in my personal life, right? There have been major surprises or events or challenges that have presented themselves, and they've all been uncomfortable, but you just got to take it on and show up, because I believe that's where the magic is happening and where your life story is really starting to have meaning.
In a session I delivered last night, I talked about on one of the slides, success is on the other side of your comfort zone. And I think what you just shared there embodies that quite well. One last tidbit there I'm going to ask from you, Chelsea. New person comes onto your team. You, right, thinking about what your CHRO had you do, those years back. Person's getting ready to go to a local Denver SHRM conference. You give them one piece of advice. They've never done networking stuff before. What's your piece of advice that you're going to give to them? They're shaking. They're like, "Hey, boss, I'm getting ready to go to this thing. I don't want to go. I'm sick. I gotta go home." What are you going to share with them?
There's three things coming. Better than ask me for one thing, right?
I know. Oh, by the way, everybody, I just want to thank Chelsea again for filling the gap. Before the show, we asked for fun facts and quotes, and Sam thought hard, but Chelsea delivered.
So the first one that comes to mind is be yourself. I'm a firm believer in, like, don't put on a show. Don't try and be who you think people want you to be there. Be yourself. Another one is don't pretend to know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. And then the third one is everyone else who's there, they're just people. It doesn't matter what level they're at. They're just people like you and I. So those are my three things. I'll leave it there because I know it exceeded the number already.
Yeah. We know what we're getting into whenever we ask a question to Chelsea. All right. So thank you. I agree with those. I think Sam concurred as well. Now, Sam, as we go over to, you're walking into this event, we set the stage a little bit before. You can deliver your response in a freestyle rap, or you can talk through it. It's up to you which way you want to go. We might have a follow-up where you post a comment about this.
I should have prepared something. Yes. Round two, I absolutely will have a rap ready. We'll bring a beat and everything. Honestly, man, my answer is not different than Chelsea's, except for I'm just going to pluck two of the three things. The number one thing for me, and again, I'm mad at myself maybe for not recognizing this, is that, like, I believe in myself. I believe in my ability to generate or to manage relationships. I believe in my ability to get to know people well and be genuine. I think, like, I genuinely like people. I genuinely care about people. I genuinely tend to, how do I say this? Like, expect the best out of people. I don't come into relationships thinking like this person has some sort of motive that I don't know about and I shouldn't trust them. Like,
they're cool until proven, a jerk.
No.
Right.
Yeah. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. And so, and I've, like, so that's the way I operate. And then I also like, I'm a little bit of a quirky guy. I've got like eclectic interests and you know, like, and I remember, you know, like the rap thing at the PHRA, like talking to people about that before, even Chelsea herself. Some people were kind of like, oh, I wouldn't do that. And I'm like, you know what? That only reinforces to me why I should, because that's who I am, right? Like that's if I'm not bringing the energy of who I am and I'm trying to conform to what other people are thinking, then it's going to come off as phony anyway, and it's silly. And then the other thing is, and Chelsea hit this on the head, and actually we had a conversation, Chelsea, myself, and another colleague of ours, related to a project that we were doing actually, but where our colleague had said, like, you know, don't be intimidated by, you know, these people at bigger organizations. Like at the end of the day, like they're all just people. And I said in that conversation too, I was like, preach, Dave, preach. And it's true, you know, because at the end of the day, I've worked in large market, like I've worked with companies, they're huge. I name dropped a few of them in the beginning. And when I was in my 20s and I was working with these folks, like I remember feeling intimidated. But then you start to get to know people and you go, oh my God, they're just like me. They're the same. And that was kind of like a eureka moment for me, thankfully, in the earlier part of my career. So that kind of lost that. And I think sometimes people expect some level of intimidation, or they expect some level of sort of like reverence towards people with titles and things like that. And I don't mean just like to be disrespectful to people. I would never act that way. But in my mind, nobody's better than anybody else. And so if you go to a conference and you're nervous because there's a lot of people there that you don't know, just remember in your head that they're just like you. Nobody's better than you. You know, people have different talents. They have different credentials. They have different years of experience. You know, none of those things are in your control. What's in your control is who you are, the way that you represent yourself, and being somebody that you're not is easy to see through. So that you know, just be who you are and let the chips fall where they may. And as a weird and quirky guy, who I think can, you know, sometimes comes off in a funny way, I can tell you it's worked out for me. So let me be your example.
So a couple follow-ons to that, Sam. We actually met each other at a PHRA event.
That's
in a
right.
Very crowded burger joint in Washington County. Yes, in the Pittsburgh area, we throw R's into some words that don't require R's. Yes, you can cringe to that. It is A-OK, all of our listeners. We probably had a lot of people just hang up the phone right there. But that was exactly it, right? Nice handshake, smile on your face. Hey, you know what's going on? You weren't talking about yourself, right? I don't even know that we talked about work for the first little bit. You gave me your card, and after I, you know, emailed you about 74,000 times, you finally emailed me back and said, "Hey, let's be friends." I say that very facetiously, but you were very open. You were the reason I'm saying this is Sam is a walk the walk, talk the talk kind of guy, right? I've seen it in action for over a year and a half now, so appreciate that insight there.
Thanks,
guys. We're going to transition here a little bit to, you know, mentorship, and with all of our, you know, chaos, you're in leadership positions, you've been in leadership positions. How do you make time in your, you know, kind of weekly, monthly regime to mentee, right? To learn from others on your personal board of advisors, but also whenever folks reach out to you to get insight, guidance, perspective, as you being the mentor. So we'll go Chelsea first, then Sam, of how you make time for this kind of thing, and if you do it during work hours.
What are work hours? First of all, I think you just say yes. And one thing I'll call out is I think this is something that Brown & Brown does really nicely. They have programs for it. They have within Heron Palmer and SNS in particular, they have buddy programs. They connect people together. They provide training on how to be a good mentor and mentee and setting expectations. And so I think all of that is very helpful. And I would also say they have different events and speaking engagements that have provided thought-provoking content about that topic. How do you make time? The reality is there's an infinite to-do list, not just from work, but from life, right? And you can never have any more hours than what we're all given. And so you have to be intentional and make the decision on what you say yes to. And so I see it as my responsibility to show up, in particular for the folks that are on my team that report to me, to say yes and be actively engaged in that, and to help make sure that they're leveraging the support and the programs that are set up within Brown and Brown. And I would say for myself, in some ways it's been by accident, and in some ways I think I maybe didn't even classify it as mentorship as much as it was just these are my people, right? And I was always thinking of it in a different way. So like Cami, who I brought up multiple times, she's my people. Like I trust her not just for work advice, but for life advice. My husband, same thing. He keeps me honest. Sam, he's definitely on my board of advisors. I know he's a straight shooter, right? And so it's funny. I guess it's happened incrementally over time through life and lived experience. But at some point, I was very easily intimidated. I was quiet. Feedback hurt my feelings. Like I can still remember conversations early on in my career where getting a criticism would literally make me cry because I just wanted to please everyone, do everything perfectly. And so somehow I've evolved to see feedback as a gift. And I truly believe that. And to filter it through the lens of, I don't believe all feedback has to be taken and incorporated. I think you can take it, say thank you, and then choose, kind of like Sam had said, I'm going to do the wrap, even if there's other people who have concerns about it, because that is me. And so I just think some of that comes with time and lived experience and maybe developing a little bit more of a thick skin, but also seeing the value in it and being honest and willing to say, I'm not perfect. It's not a realistic expectation. If I was perfect, that means there's nowhere for me to grow to. There's no areas of improvement. And then you don't ever get better. And so you're kind of sabotaging yourself.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Sam, how are we going to build on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I feel grateful to know that Chelsea thinks of me as someone on her board of advisors. I wrote her name down before the thing, but I think where I'm going with it is that I think where people could be intimidated by the idea of a board of advisors, or they might be reluctant to do it, is that they think it has to be some sort of formalized process. And like when I think of my board of advisors, it's my dad, my brother, it's Craig Reiner from Highmark, it's Chelsea and Julie and Dave, who are the practice leaders in our group, who I work with and talk with every day, and I go to for advice every day. And it's not like I don't have a standing, appointment with Chelsea or with Julie or with my dad or my brother to ask them their opinions on things. My wife too, I should also include in that group. I mean, my wife she tends to ground me a lot in this idea that I need to take things one day at a time. And I know like that might sound like it conflicts with this idea of like thinking towards the future, but it helps you to kind of believe that, hey, look, like we can build towards the future, but we can take things incrementally. And when I think about like my personal board of advisors, people that I go to for advice, reactions, feedback, I don't do it in some sort of formalized way. It's like sometimes it's a text message, sometimes it's a quick call, sometimes it's a real quick Teams call, sometimes it's an email. I want to run this idea by you. What do you think? And then, like Chelsea said, you don't always have to take feedback and turn it into whatever someone told you. Sometimes you can take pieces of it. Sometimes you can just say thank you and then move on. And she used me as an example for that one. And I think of it a lot like, playing sports growing up, right? Like I don't think I was always super coachable, but when I got into like super competitive lacrosse and my brother was my coach for many years, like I started to realize, okay, like he wants the best for me, like he's not trying to tell me I suck. He's trying to tell me I can get a lot better. And I struggle now with my young kids sometimes when I'm trying to do that, where I'm trying to be their mentor and they're like, Dad, get away from me. I'm like, no, you're such a good little athlete, Brielle. You could do this. And she just doesn't quite get it. So, I think that's, if there's one thing that I'd want people to remember, it's that it doesn't have to be formalized. It's just, you're having conversations with people, you're looking for feedback. And then what you do with it is kind of at your own discretion.
All right. Last kind of question before we wrap up here, guys, is around this concept of the career map and the personal board of advisors. You've heard about it a couple of times, seen some of the pieces from the book, heard me talk about it before, but just share one piece from just tidbit of where you see the value for early career, mid-career professionals blending that methodology together. And so on the individual side, the value, and then the organizational side, the value. We'll go Sam first and then Chelsea, and then we'll get to the wrap-up session. And I swear all the listeners will be done in less than 75 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. I think the main value for people that are in mid-career is that you need advice. You need feedback. Chelsea said it's a gift. It's true. You have to get other people's opinions, regardless of whether or not you're going to apply every piece of it. It helps you learn. It helps you grow. It helps you move forward. Organizationally, I don't, and I think most people don't love top-down hierarchical. How do you say that word?
Hierarchical.
Hierarchical.
There you go.
Kind of like tyranny, right? It's like, do what I say, not as I do, kind of a mentality. And so when you are watching people have success, you're seeing the way that they behave, and then they're in turn kind of teaching you the way to do that, coaching you in a way. It builds a culture of accountability and of like constant growth.
Let's keep building on that, Chelsea.
Yeah, I agree. I think learning from others is really important, and making sure you're developing self-awareness. And part of that is hearing how you're landing with other people. Also, just think about, the career pathing as a whole. And a lot of times when people think about career paths, it's like set steps. I'm going to go from this to this to this. And what I love about your approach to this is it's more of a matrix or a lattice. It's basically saying, here's what my options are. I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then it's kind of thinking through which one best suits me. What do I think? What do others who know me and know what's important to me think? And then that, to me, again, a lot of my opinions have changed over time. And I think back to when I made the switch from in-house to consulting. It's part of this in-house HR team that I loved. And then I found out that the company was getting acquired. And so the company that was acquiring us already had a full HR team. They didn't need me. So I served my purpose through the end of the year to get everything buttoned up, do the audits. And we had the luxury as part of that. We basically had a 6-month runway. So it's one of those unique scenarios where everybody's supporting you that you work with right now and helping you land somewhere. And so the head of HR at the time brought in someone to do a vision boarding exercise. And I remember in my mind being like, listen, I am drowning in work right now, trying to figure out how to essentially offboard all of my favorite people and close this up. And I'm going to be unemployed myself at the end of this. I don't have time for vision boarding, to make everybody feel good. And I went to that session and I still have my vision board because what was happening around the same time is my husband got the opportunity to move to Telluride and run a construction project. And so I'm like, man, I had just had my made it moment. I was named HR operations manager. Less than a month after that, I'm now losing that job. And now we're going to move to the middle of nowhere and my career is just going to die. Like, what do I do with this? Right. And so during that exercise, it was current state on one side, future state. And then you kind of had to write steps to get there. And what I had envisioned, I drew pictures of like me skiing, in the afternoon on a work day and having a successful career from Telluride, somehow staying relevant and paying off my student loans. And there were a couple other things on there. And I found it the last time we were moving. And I truly believe you've got to visualize something to manifest it and put it into action. Every single one of those things played out and happened. And so you fast forward to 6.5 years later, right? I don't live in Telluride anymore, which I'm not upset about. It's very cold there. But all of those things happened. And that's where I think the job architecture, the career pathing, you've got to put some thought into it and have a map and some action plans to play an intentional role in what your life looks like and what your career looks like.
Visualize your goals, be intentional about it. Guys, thanks so much for your time today. I'm going to do a quick recap and we'll hop off here. So we heard from Chelsea and Sam today, starting off with young Chelsea, the aspiring doctor, educated by Dr. Google, while Sam was the aspirational rapper and doctor of beats, if you will. Studied in the city of Cutco and Zippo, and post MBA had the option to go into marketing, but took a pivot. And he learned and shared to his wife, and still does, I think, that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. Chelsea was just south of Pittsburgh in Western North Carolina, studying exercise science, undergrad and grad school, then followed the American dream, packed her bags with no money at all, moving west to Denver as a fitness manager and a big dream in her pocket, making up space for those dollars that were going to be there soon. She was training somebody at the gym who wound up being one of her first colleagues, starting her path into HR. Sam wasn't as adventurous, but still wanted to rap, right? We know that. He got into a B2C sales role, was promoted to management, and then training and talent acquisition. He took his talents to Willis Towers Watson and learned how to spell benefits administration as an analyst. The better Sam got at each of his roles at each of his companies, they kept promoting him up to sales and selling stuff and business development. So keep on going, Sam. There's the recurring theme that these early career professionals undervalue the importance of relationships, and we're working to guide them to transcend beyond transactional. So thank you both for sharing your thoughts on that. While Chelsea at this time was flying past med school with 6 years of schooling and just stopped on the side, right? Totally different career path in an HR assistant gig. Everybody starts somewhere. And I love the quotes and all the positive mindset that Chelsea has through all of this. Anything that seems challenging or scary is an opportunity. Great tips to be yourself. Don't think that you have to know everything, and people are just people. Regardless, we have to be intentional with what we say yes to, always. I think somebody last night said, if we never say no, our value of yes goes down drastically. Our development and supporting of others is so important. Chelsea evolved to see feedback as a gift. And a great reminder from both of you that the PBA doesn't have to be as formal for all of us. And also that feedback comes with different levels of formalities. So thank you to the transparent gurus of pay transparency.
That's an incredible wrap up. Appreciate it, man. This was fun.
Thanks, guys.